we are going to question the merits of some research that Paul Piff did. He is a social psychologist at the University of California, Berkeley, and he's done some really fascinating work about people of privilege and how they act differently from those who are lower on the socioeconomic ladder or status. So let's take a quick look at a TED Talk that he did, and then we'll discuss.
I want you to, for a moment, think about playing a game of Monopoly. Except in this game, that combination of skill, talent, and luck that help earn you success in games as in life has been rendered irrelevant because this game's been rigged, and you've got the upper hand. You've got more money, more opportunities to move around the board, and more access to resources. And as you think about that experience, I want you to ask yourself, how might that experience of being a privileged player in a rigged game change the way that you think about yourself and regard that other player? What we've been finding across dozens of studies and thousands of participants across this country is that as a person's levels of wealth increase, their feelings of compassion and empathy go down. And their feelings of entitlement, of deservingness, and their ideology of self-interest increases.
So this study was really interesting because, as you can tell, there was a rigged game of Monopoly, and the participants know that it's rigged. The person who has the advantages knows that the only reason why he or she is winning is because the system is set in his or her favor. Now, the fascinating part of the study was, even though they knew it was rigged, they acted as though they were winning and it was justified. It was their hard work, it was their skill and their talent. So they would move the puzzle, the pieces in a more aggressive way. They would eat the pretzels that were set next to them in a very aggressive way. And it was as if they were these champions. And it's questionable that they acted that way because there was a sense of entitlement demonstrated in their behavior. Now, Chris, first question goes to you because I'm really curious, do you think that this type of study taps into a larger issue that we have in society? Do you think that this is really indicative of what rich people act like?
Yeah, I think it is, clearly. In fact, the book I'm working on now, I'm planning to introduce a concept, RAS, which is Rich Asshole Syndrome, which basically posits that people, when there is this disconnect, this inequality, the privilege becomes internalized and we develop psychological mechanisms to deal with it because it's painful for both parties, not just for the poor. It's painful for the wealthy to step over someone on your way into the nice restaurant. That doesn't really work for us because, I'm always talking about prehistory, right? And for 95% of our existence as a species, our survival depended upon cooperation and interdependence. And in prehistoric, pre-agricultural societies, one of the few things that you find universally is what anthropologists call fierce egalitarianism. So all food is shared. Status is something that's very carefully controlled. A hunter the hunters trade arrows so that you can't even tell from the arrow in the animal who killed it to make sure nobody gets too far above anyone else. So this is a very important part of at least evolved human nature for a long time. Then you take that animal and you put them into a competitive hierarchical situation and all sorts of things start to go haywire. So there's interesting research with the Pinaha people in the upper Amazon, which are hunter-gatherers. Psychologists came in and tried to set up some games for them to play, and they refused to play because the games have winners and losers, and they don't interact that way.
And now it's so ingrained in American culture, the competitiveness,
right.
and of course that is a symptom of a capitalistic system that we have here. The more wealth you have, the more status, you're considered to be a better member of society. Gina, let me bring you in. What do you think about the fact that this is obviously a liberal researcher from Berkeley? Do you think that this study might have a little bit of confirmation bias in it?
Honestly, I don't know why that would matter. I mean, there are really, really rich liberals that people love to throw around terms like limousine liberal and things like that. There are rich conservatives. And so, I mean, in that way, it's crazy to say, but money feels like the great equalizer. You know, people will say, like, I don't care what side of the fence you're on, you're an asshole if you have it and you won't share it. But the thing that I don't really understand, maybe it's because I am broke, but the thing that doesn't make any sense is that in the study with the Monopoly players, if he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that the only reason he was winning was because that was the way the game was rigged, then where does the entitlement come from? Yep. And that's the question I have about society. If you're, say, an heiress to some oil baron or whatever you're into, and you know that everything's been provided for you because of somebody else's work, and the only reason you have what you have, it has nothing to do with anything you've done yourself, then where does that entitlement come from? I truly don't understand it. And what Chris says makes sense. You have to start drawing conclusions in your brain. Your brain will just do that just to deal with the situation. But I don't get it.
It's like people at the casino, when they start winning, they feel better about themselves, as if there's something in them that is better. I mean, they're just pulling a thing or spinning the roulette wheel. It has nothing to do with skill, right? And yet, when you're on a hot streak, you feel like, I deserve it. The gods are smiling upon me now. You know?
I think the human brain always tries to rationalize behavior, right? So, for instance, when you are extremely wealthy as a result of your parents' hard work, you don't want to deal with that truth, right? You want to believe that you deserve it. No one wants to feel like they're sucking off, you know, whatever their parents worked really hard for, mooching. You want to feel like, hey, you know what? I deserve this, and my hard work and my skill and my talent is what led to this situation.
The point that what you're really talking about is empathy, and how do you empathize? And you empathize with people where you look at and say, that could be me, right? So rich people interact with other rich people, and they don't really realize what poor people are going through because you don't really see them. But it cuts both ways. We don't have a lot of empathy for rich people. So, for example,
what kind of empathy should we have for rich people?
I'll show you. You know, I had to drive here in my Lamborghini because my Tesla, you know, the battery went out on it, right?
Just checking
it's
for
tough,
a
right? Right? I mean, do you guys like really feel sorry for me that, you know, my Tesla's in the shop? And it's 2 times this month it's been in the shop. You know, do you really feel?
I have empathy for rich people because honestly, I've had this weird aspect of my life where I have been very close friends with very wealthy people. In a week, I'm going to be on a 130-foot yacht in the Sea of Cortez.
Do you need a date? I mean, I know you're married, but...
Yeah, and I need a date. Yeah, I don't want to talk about this guy too much because he is a good friend, but there's a loneliness to wealth. I lived in a house full of fashion models for 3 years in Barcelona. There's a loneliness to beauty.
Yeah.
Well, it's tough for them.
I feel a lot of empathy for you right now.
I wasn't getting laid. Come on. I was the ugly guy. I was the only non-model in the house. Imagine what that's like, ego-wise. But my point is that people who are separate, whether it's from fame, wealth, beauty, whatever it is, they're lonely. They are lonely. It's hard for them to connect with other people because there's always a suspicion that there's an agenda. There's they want me for my money. They want, they're trying to get this or get that. So I think that, but I think your point is very well taken, because if you talk to any homeless person, ask them who gives them the most money. It's the people who are one step away from them. Right. It's the people who, as you say, can say, oh, that could be me at any moment.
Away from being
So you look at the story that's getting a lot of play now. This poor 13-year-old girl, right, went in for a tonsillectomy, ended up brain dead, right? You know, I have 2 kids roughly that age, and I look at that and say, well, you know, that could be me. That could be my kid there. That could happen to me. And it's getting all kinds of news coverage, right? But at the same time, at this time, there's like 1,000 kids dying somewhere of malnutrition and curable diseases and so on. And it's like, well, my kids aren't malnutrition. You know, my kids aren't, you know, their disease is going to get cured. And we have no way of abstracting this large number of 1,000 kids dying, but we can certainly see it in one child that looks like our kid. It could be our kid. And so that's where our empathy comes in. We sort of see it.
You always see these people, movie stars or wealthy people, like, you know, their wife gets breast cancer and suddenly they are working for the breast cancer, research fund. And it's like, oh, it affected you. Or change is somebody whose child is gay. Like suddenly, oh yeah, I'm a right winger, but
talking about the societies, the various tribes you're talking about. I mean, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah,
right.
That's it.
Right. And it's easy to empathize because you're all in the same boat. You're all having the same effects. And if something goes, if your neighbor is starving to death, well, you're pretty close. Yeah, and you're pretty close to being starving to death too. Right. It could happen to you.
And shame is functional. If you don't fix it, everyone knows, and you're an idiot. Whereas in our society, your rich friends are the only people you hang out with anyway, so
you live in a bubble. I like that you use that terminology because it's absolutely true. I mean, if you are extremely wealthy, you're living in Beverly Hills, I mean, you're surrounded by other wealthy people. You don't necessarily see the same things that middle class individuals or working class individuals see.
Well, you can empathize with someone not having good maid service.
But also, a lot of very wealthy people and a lot of women and men in Beverly Hills do a lot of charitable work, and they do a lot of things that are very philanthropic, and they're, on a larger scale, they're not, maybe they might not be going into orphanages or prisons or whatever, but they are sort of taking it to another level and bringing all of this focus and all of this money to the problem, which is also really cool. But I actually just spent the weekend in Tijuana, and I don't even remember it. No, I was at an orphanage for the time, and it was so fascinating because I've never been there before. Yeah. And it is right on the sea. You see the Guadalupe Islands, and there are these beautiful multi-million-dollar homes and these hotels, and then feet from it is just ramshackle, rundown, impoverished beyond anything I've ever seen in my life, and they live right next door to each other. It's not even like New York where you have to turn a corner. I mean, you see it, they're eye to eye seeing each other. And I just think, how can you let this happen when you're looking, right? Your view is not obstructed from this community, but like you said, you just find ways to
rationalize.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, well, that's their lot in life. This is my lot in life.
So much to comment on. I'm loving this conversation. First, I want to comment on the charity point that you made, because there has been some research into charity that wealthy people do versus charity that middle class people do. And actually, the top 20% in 2011 donated about 1.3% of their income to charity. And those charities included like universities, art galleries, those types of things. Those in the bottom 20% donated 3.2% of their income. So they actually donated a larger chunk of their income to charity, and that usually involved homeless shelters. So we're talking about a completely different ball game there.
And their name isn't on the wing of the homeless shelter
now. They're not really doing it because they want some sort of recognition for
tax break.
Tax, exactly. They don't get the same tax breaks that wealthy people do. Yeah. So there is a little bit of a difference there. But what you said, Gina, about what's happening in Mexico is great, because we're starting to see that here in the United States. When you have people advocating for private prisons, private education, private police force, private everything, you're going to have people who can afford the best of the best. They're going to be living in their mega mansions with moats around it, while poor people are on the streets and there's no upward mobility for people anymore. That so-called American dream is kind of being destroyed. And I sound like apocalyptic here, but if you look at the way our system is rigged against us, it's so clear that we're headed in that direction. Yeah. And it's sad. It's very, very scary. So what do you guys see for the future? I mean, do you think that research like this is going to convince politicians to actually make a change so our system isn't so rigged?
Well,
Gina?
I think Chris made a really great point earlier. I think really the only way that it's going to work with people who are already so jaded is shaming. When you talk about, well, in these tribal communities, if you're not the one that's helping somebody else who needs it, people are going to notice that, and they're going to call you out on it. And I think we've tried to tell people to do the right thing. We've tried to tell people the benefits of doing the right thing. And at this point, I think you just have to call them out and see what happens.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be tough, though, because we live in such a large-scale society where our interactions aren't really on a personal level. Yeah. Dunbar's number, the famous limit of 150 people, is how many we can actually keep track of on a personal level. But maybe an interesting way to affect some change would be to keep pushing this research into happiness, which seems to show that the one most effective way that you can increase your level of happiness is to help someone else. right? Not to buy things, not to buy a new car, this or that. It's to help have a positive effect on someone else's life. So if people who have these resources even are working from a selfish motivation, I want to be happier. Okay, I'm rich now. What do I do to be happier? What you do is you help people. So maybe we can appeal to their selfishness.
Let me sort of balance your apocalyptic viewpoint here with a little bit of optimism. And if you look at the long term, right? Maybe we're a harder nation than we were a couple years ago, but we're definitely a more empathetic, caring nation than we were 100 years ago or 200 years ago. I mean, we just passed the Affordable Care Act, so now we're providing care for a lot of people who were previously uninsured. Gay marriage is going up throughout the population. Again, that's sort of an empathic looking at these situations and being more caring about a wider range of people. So I think if you take a longer view and say, are we a more caring, nicer nation than, say, the Roman Empire was? I think we are. So my more optimistic view is, in the long term, the trends are in the right way. In the short term, you may argue that things have gotten worse, but in the long term, I think we're doing better.
But then if you take an even longer view and you look back pre-Roman, pre-agricultural, you find that inequality is much worse than it was in pre-agricultural society.
So it's
we were
the
all starving to death, too.
No, we weren't.
The Romans
weren't.
caused this problem. Let's get them. Wait, do they still exist? Are there still the Romans? No? Okay.
Italians. We're called Italians.
Oh, no, they're
now.
fine.
There are certain characteristics that we won't mention.
Every time we have this conversation involving wealth inequality and income inequality, it always comes back to money in politics, which is something that we care about a lot here on the Young Turks. We want to get the money out of politics, which is why we have a political action committee, wolf-pack.com. I'd get in trouble if I didn't mention that. But the reality is, we really need people, politicians that are going to represent us. We need people that are going to listen to the people and refuse to rig the system against us. And in order to do that, we have to get money from these amoral corporations out of politics. So if you really want to help that effort, go to the website. You can do something as simple as sign a petition. You can join the cause. But it's definitely something that we need to do if we want to save the real American dream and what this country was founded upon.